Thank you, President of the Commission.
ingiustificabile sta colpendo il nostro continente.
An unacceptable
Quello che
tragedy.
sta accadendo sotto i nostri
What's
occhi a
happening in
pochi
our
chilometri dai
continent,
nostri
in front of
confini,
our eyes,
è un
just a few
attacco
kilometers away from our
condotto dalla
borders,
Federazione
is
Russa
an
a
attack
tutto
being
campo
carried
contro
out
la
from the Russian
sovranità e l'integrità
Federation
territoriale di un paese
on
democratico.
the
Le
territorial
immagini che ci
integrity and
giungono
sovereignty
dall'Ucraina
of a democratic
testimoniano non
country. The
solo un
images
attacco
that come from
ingiustificato
Ukraine
e
show
indiscriminato, ma la
that the
palese
attack is
violazione di
indiscriminate
tutte
and
le regole del
unacceptable,
diritto
but
internazionale,
also
comprese quelle che
show
regolano
clear
i conflitti.
violations of
Bisogna
international
reagire
law.
per mettere fine
We
a
need
queste
to
azioni mirate
act
contro
to
obiettivi
put an
civili,
end
donne e
to
bambini,
these
che non
actions which are aimed
rappresentano una
at
guerra vera e
women
propria,
and children,
ma
civilian
una barbarie,
populations.
i cui
This is not
responsabili
war,
dovranno
this
essere
is
chiamati in causa nelle sedi
barbaric,
competenti.
and those who are
Barbarie alla
responsible
quale il popolo
need to
ucraino,
be
cui
judged for their
esprimiamo la
actions.
nostra piena
These are
solidarietà
barbaric
e
actions against
vicinanza,
the
sta
Ukrainian
seguendo con
people.
coraggio,
We
dignità e con grande
salute
spirito
their
di
bravery
resilienza.
and
Così
their
come
resilience.
penso che oggi sia opportuno
I think
sottolineare
it's
quello
important
che è
today to
l'azione, il
emphasize
ruolo
that
dei
the
paesi del confine
actions
orientale, i quali
and
stanno svolgendo
role
un'azione
of
nell'accoglienza e nella
countries
gestione
on
dell'emergenza umanitaria
on
che è
Ukraine's western
encomiabile.
border
Una reazione, quella
are
ucraina,
crucial.
forse per
They're
molti
carrying out
inaspettata
very
e che
important
richiede da parte
humanitarian
nostra,
work.
in cooperazione con altri
We
paesi
need
dell'Alleanza
to work
Atlantica
together
e della
with
comunità
NATO and
internazionale, un
other
impegno ancora
countries
maggiore per
across the
difendere
globe
i valori
in
di
order to
libertà e
defend the
democrazia.
values of
Ed è per
freedom
questo
and
che
democracy.
l'Unione Europea e
And
l'Occidente
it's
hanno
because of that
sicuramente
that the European
compiuto nel
Union
passato
and the West,
alcuni errori, ma oggi è il momento dell'unità e
who
della
have made
fermezza.
mistakes in the
Per
past,
questo da parte
need
del nostro
to
gruppo
stand
ribadisco
firm,
il pieno
and
sostegno alle
together
sanzioni
today
e a tutte quelle
our
azioni che
group
vanno a
fully
colpire il
supports
potere
the
economico
sanctions
e
and
militare
any
di
actions
Mosca
that
e
will
che
strike
costringono il
at
Cremlino a
Moscow's
mettere fine a
military
questa
and
vergognosa
economic
offensiva nei
power. We want to
confronti
see Moscow
dell'Ucraina.
forced
Ma
to
al tempo
end
stesso
this
è
shameful
opportuno anche
conflict in
far sì che
Ukraine.
nel
We
preservare
also
l'unità
need to be aware
politica e
that
le
in
decisioni dell'Unione
preserving
Europea si riesca a
political
mantenere il
unity,
consenso e l'opinione pubblica europea
we need
su quanto già
to
è accaduto
work
oltre a
hard
questi 2 anni di
to
pandemia
ensure
sul
that public
fronte
opinion is
economico.
with us.
Ecco perché
And
dobbiamo ragionare con
the people
forza
of
per
Europe are
guardare
going
con
to suffer,
attenzione
given that
all'istituzione
this
di
is
un
coming on top of the
fondo per
pandemic and
poter
economic
garantire i
crisis. So we
cittadini e
need
le
a
categorie
fund
colpite da
to
queste sanzioni.
provide
Grazie.
funds to citizens who are struck by these sanctions. Thank you.
Danke. Als
Thank you
Rednerin
very
hat sich
much.
nun
The
Frau
next speaker
Villanueva Ruiz
is
zu Wort gemeldet.
Mrs. Villanueva Ruiz.
Gracias, presidenta.
Thank you very much,
Quiero hoy
President.
expresar nuestra rotunda condena a la
Let
invasión de
me
Putin en
say
Ucrania y
that we
nuestra
firmly
máxima
condemn the
solidaridad con las
invasion
víctimas
by
del pueblo
Putin, and
ucraniano
we
en estos
want to
momentos
show maximum
tan
solidarity to
difíciles.
the victims in
Pero hoy
Ukraine in
cabe
these very
recordar
difficult
también que
times.
tenemos
It's also
presentes en esta
important
Cámara
to remember
grupos de
that
extrema
today
derecha,
there are
aliados de
extreme
Putin,
right groups
financiados
in
para
this
trabajar
chamber who are
precisamente
allies of
por la
Putin
desestabilización
and
de
who
Europa
have helped
y
finance
que
and
no
work for the
se puede seguir
destabilization of
blanqueando.
Europe, and this is not something we can
Europa
continue
debe
to
actuar con
hide.
firmeza,
Europe needs
pero
to
con el
act
objetivo de construir la
firmly
paz.
and with the objective
prioridad
of
debe ser
building peace.
parar la
The
pérdida de
priority
vidas
has
humanas,
to be to
evitar
stem the
las
loss
tentaciones
of
de utilizar este
human
conflicto para
lives.
afianzar
This
otros
conflict
intereses.
cannot be
Debemos
used to
impulsar
further other
espacios de
interests.
negociación
We need
internacional
to
y
foster
usar
spaces
todos
of
los medios a
international
nuestro
dialogue. We need
alcance
to use
para
all the
cuidar los
tools we have
espacios
at
de
our
diálogo, porque
disposal
sabemos
to promote
que es
that
la única
dialogue.
vía para
We know
poner
that that
fin
is the
a esta
only
terrible
way
tragedia.
to end this
No
terrible
cometamos viejos
tragedy.
errores, agravando
Let us not
conflictos y
repeat
participando en
old
escaladas militares que se
errors
han
and
extendido
see
años con
military
inmenso
escalation, which will
Es el
lead to
momento de
years
hacer
of
política
pain.
en
This is
mayúsculas
the
y demostrar
moment to
que
be
Europa puede y
involved
estará
in
a la altura de los tiempos.
politics and show that
Solo la
Europe
paz
is up
es el
to this
objetivo.
challenge.
Muchas
Peace is the
gracias.
only objective. Thank you very much.
Danke, Frau Kollegin. Und das
Thank
Wort
you much
hat
indeed. Now I'll
Herr
give the floor
Castaldo.
to Mr. Castaldo.
Thank you, Chair. Today, we are not simply condemning an unjustifiable aggression. Today, we stand up united in this House to face the criminal invasion of an authoritarian regime against international law, our principles, our values, therefore against all of us. Putin's cynical bet assumes he would quickly overthrow the Ukrainian democracy with his divisions on the ground, but also brings other divisions, no less dangerous, through propaganda and fear within our countries among our peoples. Our bounden duty is to make sure that it will fail, with our resolute support to the heroic resistance in Ukraine and its official recognition as EU candidates, and with the immediate adoption of a new solidarity package based on common European bonds. We must immediately support also our companies and families who will suffer the dire consequences of the dutiful sets of sanctions aimed at bringing Moscow to the negotiating table. This is not the war of all the Russians. This is a crime perpetrated by a tyrant and his accomplices. Thousands of citizens are bravely taking to the streets to shout their clear no, risking their lives to oppose his imperialistic ravings. They deserve our full support. This existential threat is a crucial moment in our history and calls for exceptional efforts if we really want to protect peace, democracy, and our common destiny. Sometimes it takes courage to grow up and become who we really are. Slava Europa, Slava Ukraina.
Unser nächster Redner ist
Thank you
Herr
much
Michael
indeed.
Gahler.
Mr. Gala, please.
Frau Präsidentin, liebe Kolleginnen und
President.
Kollegen, Szanowni Ukraińskie
Colleagues.
Druzy, Slava Ukraini.
Slava Ukraini.
Was sich hier vor unseren Augen abspielt, ist
What's
Krieg in
happening
Europa in
is
Echtzeit.
war in
Ist
Europe in real
unermessliches
time.
Leid unschuldiger Menschen,
Suffering
ist die größte
innocent people
Katastrophe für die
is the
Ukraine
biggest
seit
catastrophe
dem
for
deutschen Einmarsch 1941.
Ukraine since
Und es
1941
schuld
when
und
Germany
ausschließlich in
invaded.
Verantwortung
And the only
eines
responsible
zynischen,
is a
ständig lügenden und
cynical,
menschenverachtenden russischen Diktators,
lying
der die Existenz der
dictator
Ukraine als demokratischer,
who
unabhängiger Staat
rejects
beenden
the
und sie gegen den Willen
existence
der
of
Menschen
Ukraine as an
heim ins
independent
Reich holen
state
will.
and wants to
Dieser
bring his
Versuch
people
läuft
back
gerade.
into the empire.
Und dieser Versuch muss scheitern.
This must fail.
Als die Sowjetunion 1948 die Blockade Westberlins begann, die
1948,
Rote
beginning
Armee
of the
stand rundherum,
Berlin blockade.
da richtete der regierende Bürgermeister Ernst Reuter einen Appell an
Ernst
die Völker der
Reuter,
Welt. Heute
then Berlin mayor,
versucht
spoke
das
to the world and he
revisionistische
said,
Russland, mit seinen
revisionist Russia
Invasionstruppen die
is trying
ukrainische
to
Hauptstadt einzukreisen und zu
do the
strangulieren
same thing now in
und die freien
Ukraine
Menschen dort
to
in die sowjetische Knechtschaft zu führen.
put
Und deshalb ist es
Ukrainian
angebracht, diesen
people
Appell zu wiederholen.
into
Ihr Völker
their
der
guardianship.
Welt, ihr Völker in Amerika,
Peoples
in
of the
Europa,
world, in
in der
America,
freien
in
Welt,
Europe, in the free
schaut
world,
auf diese Stadt und dieses
look
Land
at that
und
city,
erkennt,
look at that
dass ihr
country
dieses Land
and
und
understand
dieses Volk
that that
nicht
country, that
preisgeben
people
dürft, nicht preisgeben könnt.
cannot be left
Diesem Volk,
behind.
das die Revolution der Würde mit ukrainischen und Europafahnen bewirkt hat,
This
das gesagt
people
hat, wohin es schaut
and has said
und wohin es strebt,
where it
dem
wants to
müssen wir
be.
heute ein politisches
We
Signal
need to
geben,
give that people
dass sie
a
zu uns
political
gehören,
signal that they belong
dass
to
ihr
us,
Freiheitskampf nicht vergebens ist,
that their
dass das
fight for
Böse,
freedom isn't
das
in vain,
gleichermaßen stalinistische
that
und
this
faschistische
evil, this
Putin-Regime nicht obsiegen
Stalinist,
wird.
fascist
Und dass es nach
Putin
dieser
regime will
Prüfung,
not
nach diesem
be
Kreuzweg,
victorious.
einem Wiederaufbau auf
And
einem Weg
after
in eine
all
gemeinsame
of this is over,
europäische
they can
Zukunft
start
geben wird.
reconstruction
Ich
on a
bitte
path
um
to Europe.
Zustimmung zu
So I would
unserer
ask for
Resolution.
your approval
Slava
of this
Ukraini.
resolution. Slava Ukraini.
Danke, Herr Gahler.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gala.
Wort ist Herr Tonino Piccola.
Next we have Mr. Piccola.
Hvala.
Thank you.
Da, agresija Rusije na Ukrajinu može
The
biti
aggression
uvod u
of Russia
sumrak
against
čovječanstva.
Ukraine can be the
Ali
beginning
novog
of the end of
pravednijeg
humankind,
međunarodnog poretka.
but it could also be the
Glavni
beginning
razlog
of
za
a new
rat je
world order.
autoritarna priroda
The main
režima
reason
pod
for the war is
apsolutizmom
the
ruskog
authoritarian
predsjednika.
rule of
Ne
Putin.
zna se što je gore.
Which is worse,
Putinova vojna agresija ili
Putin's
njegov
aggression
narativ kojim
or his
opravdava
narrative
nasilništvo.
justifying violence?
Putin je računao na pasivnost
Putin
Ukrajinaca
counted
i
on
podijeljenost
Ukraine's
Zapada.
passiveness and the
Precijenio je svoju
division of the
snagu,
West, but he
podcijenio snagu
overestimated
otpora
his strength
Ukrajinaca i
and
sposobnosti Zapada da se
underestimated
ujedini.
the Ukrainian
Ovaj rat
resilience and the
izaziva
ability of
isjećanja
the
na
West
ratnu
to come
agresiju na moju
together.
zemlju,
This
Hrvatsku.
war reminds me of the
Prije 30
military
godina.
aggression against my
Napadi na
country,
dječje bolnice,
Croatia,
civilne objekte,
30 years
rušenje
ago,
gradova,
attacks
mnogo
on
izbjeglica.
children, civilian
Putin mora,
buildings,
kao i
destruction
Milošević,
and
odgovarati
refugees.
za svoje postupke
Just
pred
as
sudom
Milosevic
za
did,
ratne
Putin
zločine.
must answer for his
Njemu će biti
actions
vrlo teško
before the
izaći
International
iz ovog
Criminal
rata.
Court.
Kremljinu bi
Putin
se
will find it
mogla
difficult
dogoditi
to come
ruska
out of this
verzija
war.
Majdana.
Kremlin
Povijest je
might
pokazala da se
experience the
diktatore
Russian
može
version
pobijediti,
of the Maidan.
ali jednako je
History
važno
has shown
otkloniti okolnosti
that
koje su dovele do
dictators can be
pojave
vanquished,
diktatora.
but it is equally
Ukrajina
important to eliminate
krvari,
the
ali
circumstances
Putinov režim
leading to
će
their rule.
iskrvariti.
Ukraine will
Živjela
bleed, but
Europska
Putin's
Ukrajina.
Russia will bleed
Slava
out.
Ukrajini.
Glory to Ukraine and Slava Ukraini.
Dann Nathalie
Next we have Nathalie
Loiseau.
Loiseau.
Il a fallu une guerre.
It took a war.
Il a fallu une guerre sur le
It
sol
took a war
européen
on
pour que
European
l'Europe
soil
apprenne à
for
parler le
Europe to learn
langage
to
de la
speak the language of
puissance.
power.
Il a fallu
It
Vladimir
took
Poutine
Vladimir Putin
et sa guerre de trop
and his
pour
war
que
too
le lien
far
transatlantique
for
se
the
resserre,
transatlantic
que
ties
l'OTAN
to
se réveille
retighten,
et que la
NATO to
défense
wake up, and for
européenne
European
naisse
defence
enfin.
finally to emerge.
Mais il a surtout fallu
But it took
l'extraordinaire
above all the
courage
extraordinary
de
courage
Volodymyr
of
Zelensky et
Vladimir
du peuple
Zelensky
ukrainien
and the Ukrainian
pour que
people
nous nous
for
sentions
us
enfin
finally
obligés
to feel obliged
d'essayer d'être
to
à
try
la hauteur.
to rise to the occasion.
Ne nous leurrons pas.
Let's not
La
fool
crise sera
ourselves. The
longue
crisis
et
will
elle
be a
sera
long
dure.
one and it will be tough.
Nous allons devoir
We
tenir,
will have to hold strong,
assumer le
to pay
prix
the
de nos
price of our
décisions
decisions,
et
and
surtout
above
aller
all,
plus
to go
loin dans
further
le
in
renforcement de
strengthening
notre union.
our union.
À Maïdan en
At the
2014,
Maidan
c'est
in
le drapeau
2014, it was a
européen que
European
les
flag
Ukrainiens
that was
brandissaient
flourished by
pour
the
réclamer la
Ukrainians
fin
to
de
call
la
for the
tutelle
end
de
of
Moscou.
Moscow's dominion.
Aujourd'hui, dans les abris
Today,
où ils se
in the
réfugient contre
shelters
les
where
bombes,
they
on voit encore
seek shelter
des
from the
drapeaux
bombs, the
européens.
European flags can still be
C'est
seen.
vers nous que
We are the
l'Ukraine
ones
regarde.
the Ukrainians are
Nous
looking
devons
to.
prouver aux
We
Ukrainiens
must prove to the
qu'ils ont
Ukrainians
raison
that they are
de
right
croire
to
en nous.
believe in us.
Nous devons aimer l'Europe
We must love Europe
autant qu'ils l'aiment.
as much
Slava
as they
Ukraini.
love it. Slava Ukraini.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you very much
Frau
indeed.
Vizepräsidentin Heidi Hautala.
Vice President Heidi Hautala, please.
Arvoisa puheenjohtaja, Venäjän hyökkäys
President.
Ukrainaa vastaan on saanut EUn viimein
The
näyttämään
attack
sellaista
on
yhtenäisyyttä
Ukraine has
ja globaalia
finally
johtajuutta,
meant
jota siltä on kauan odotettu.
that we have
EU ja
shown
koko
our unity
demokraattinen
and that we've
maailma
shown
ovat onnistuneet
global
yhdistämään
leadership.
voimansa
That's what we've
Ukrainan
needed.
tueksi.
I think we've been able
Presidentti
to
Sauli
show
Niinistö
that our
kuvasi
strength now
tuntemuksiaan
has been brought to bear to
sanomalla,
support
että
Ukraine.
naamiot on nyt pudotettu.
Sauli
Jäljellä
Niinistö,
ovat
the
vain sodan
Finnish
kylmät
president,
kasvot.
said that
Tilanne
the
on
masks now have
täydellinen
fallen.
herätys
All we see now is the
todellisuuteen,
face of
vaikka
war.
merkit Venäjän erittäin huolestuttavasta aggressiivisesta
What we see
kehityksestä
now
ovat olleet ilmassa
is
jo pitkään.
A very
Nyt jos koskaan on
difficult
rakennettava
development that we've seen
todellinen
happening
turvallisuus-
over
ja
many, many years.
puolustusyhteistyö Euroopan unionille, ja sen tulee kattaa kaikki EU-maat, ja sen tulee antaa suojaa
We'll need
myös
to
EU:n
therefore work as the
läheisille
EU,
kumppaneille.
as member
Hyvät
states,
ystävät, teille ei tarvitse kertoa, että
and help
Suomessa,
our neighbours.
sotilaallisesti liittoutumattomassa
We can't,
maassa, herätys
in
todellisuuteen
Finland,
on ollut
in a
vielä
non-aligned
jäätävämpi.
member
Ja
state,
mitä tiivimmäksi EUn ja Naton
we
yhteys
were
tästä edes rakentuu, sitä
frozen, if you
helpompi
will.
Suomen
But
tilanteessa
now
olevien
we're
maiden
actually
on voittaa
seeing
esteet, joita Venäjä on niiden eteen kasannut,
possible
mikäli ne haluavat
that
sinetöidä
we might be in the same
jäsenyydellä
situation.
jo nyt läheisen kumppanuuden Naton kanssa.
countries that put themselves in Russia's way, this happens to them.
Thank you, Frau
So we
Kollegin.
would line out to look for NATO.
Herr Kollege Bardella.
Thank you much indeed, Ms. Bardella.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you.
Alors que des négociations
President.
étaient plus que jamais ouvertes,
Negotiations were underway more than ever, but Vladimir Putin took an unacceptable step, putting Europe under the scourge of war. The sovereignty of a people and country was violated. So solidarity with the people of Ukraine, they've entered into a resistance to defend their homeland. But the tragic lessons of history must not cloud our vision. We need to look at the complexities as we seek peace and de-escalation. For 20 years now, we've been moving in a direction that has taken us under the American flag, and we have an imbalance in our relationship with Russia. Our own freedom to act has been sacrificed to an illusion and an archaic conflict. We need to be firm, and we need to be unambiguous in our unity and our support for the people of Ukraine and our condemnation of this invasion. It is nonetheless dishonest for the EU institutions to make use of this to take a vision of federalism forward that the people of Europe reject. NATO, an expansion of the EU, won't help in any way. The priority is to stop the arms. Russia should not come back to face the kind of sanctions which have not helped. Undermining the purchasing power of the people who are already suffering doesn't help with strategic autonomy. And the sanctions which have been in place since 2014 have been in this case. We should not carry on using methods which we condemn elsewhere in Europe. Mature democracies such as ours shouldn't be closing down media stations, even if they're under foreign influence. It is also no point fanning the flames of war. We need to seek peace and de-escalation, and we also need to return to a free, independent, respected France, which is able to operate in a balance in a multipolar world.
Frau Kollegin Anna Fotyga.
Anna Fotyga, the floor is yours.
Thank you, President. I salute heroism and resistance of Ukrainian people facing the unprecedented aggression from the Kremlin, Putin's Russian Federation. I really admire heroism of Ukrainian leadership. President Zelensky already finds his place in universal history. I admire heroism of commanders, soldiers, and in particular, ordinary people. You are invincible. It is our war as well, and in resisting aggression, you are the best part of us, the West. We are honored by your request to become a member of the European Union. We'll do our utmost to provide you candidacy status as soon as possible and immediately on unprecedented rules, the membership, therefore, because we need you, and of course you need us. In this, I speak on behalf of entire ECR, Polish delegation. All of them fully support the resolution as negotiated by me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mr. Pineda Mano.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, President. We condemn the Russian invasion of Ukraine. No nuances. Not 8 years since Donbass. We've seen impunity of the various assassinations by these gangs of Nazis. The Minsk agreements haven't been adhered to, but nothing can justify this attack. We're against war, and that's why we cannot support this resolution calling to arms, and which says that it's a guarantee of peace, and refers to an instrument of war, which is NATO. And the sanctions that are against the civil population, well, never in the whole history of conflicts have sanctions helped anything. A fund to support peace cannot be used to buy weapons. We defend diplomacy, politics as the only way of resolving the conflict. We defend the sending of humanitarian aid and opening the borders for those refugees from that war. Our Secretary General, Julio Anguita, said, "May wars be damned and the swines that support them." Thank you. Kostas Papadakis is next, please.
Η καταδίκη μας στην εισβολή της καπιταλιστικής
Our
Ρωσίας στην
condemnation of the capitalist aggression of Russia combines with the condemnation of the war crimes of the US, NATO, and the European Union against the peoples of Yugoslavia, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and Libya. The imperialist competition for spheres and influence and the natural resources led to the capitalist war. which is paid with human lives and poverty. All this 30 years after the capitalist restoration of the Soviet Union, that socialism made it for people to live in equity for decades. Now, armaments are paid by the people, and this leads to escalation of the imperialist war, with the deep intervention of Greece through NATO bases. Peoples do not choose sides. No intervention, no involvement in the war, no armies outside national borders, decoupling from the EU and NATO. People in power.
Danke.
Thank you. Andrius Kubilius, you have the floor.
Dear brothers and sisters in Ukraine, dear colleagues, first of all, I would like to praise heroism of Ukrainian people. I would like to praise heroism of Ukrainian soldiers and the heroic leadership of President Vladimir Zelensky. Ukrainians are facing and defending themselves against the war launched by a real new Nazi regime in Kremlin. Putin is a real war criminal. Ukrainians are suffering because we in the West till now were too weak to stop Putin crimes from the very beginning. Ukrainians with their blood are fighting for their right to reunite with Europe. They are more Europeans than many of us. That is why we need to give them candidate status immediately, and then we need to design special, fast procedure for Ukraine to join us. There is an example of such a special procedure when in 1990 Eastern Germany integrated into European Union, and it took less than 1 year. So let's establish a special procedure also for Ukraine's swift reunification with Europe. After EU started to deliver weapons to Ukraine, when SWIFT and other banking sanctions were introduced, we need next steps. First of all, we need to stop imports of Russian oil and gas immediately. Each day, we are paying to Putin for 100 new T-72 tanks, twice more than Ukrainians are able to destroy during one day on the battlefield. Second, let's create a multi-billion Free Ukraine Fund to support resilience, reconstruction, and modernization of Ukrainian economy. Let's finance it in the same way as we finance Next Generation EU Fund with EU borrowing in the markets. Thanks, Josep Borrell, for a good idea. Third, let's introduce full-scale SWIFT and other sanctions also against criminal Lukashenko and his banks. And the last point, stable peace on the European continent will be possible only if deputinization of Russia will happen. With the help of Ukrainian victories on the battlefields, with our sanctions, and with the help of ordinary Russians protesting on the streets, deputinization of Russia is coming closer and closer. Mr. Putin, you lost this criminal war. International Tribunal in Hague is waiting for you, for justice to be served. Justice, first of all, to Ukrainians. Razom do перемоги. Slava Ukraini.
Danke, Herr Kubilius.
Thank you, Mr. Kubilius. Mr. Sven Mikser, please.
Colleagues, I am proud at how strong and united we are today, but we have to be honest. We have been painfully slow and painfully late waking up to the true nature of Putin's Russia. I hope that today we finally truly understand the urgency and the existential nature of the current situation. If we do, it is imperative that we support Ukraine in every way possible without holding anything back. This includes lethal defensive equipment, economic and humanitarian aid, help to the refugees, and yes, also launching an honest and accession process for Ukraine to join our union. Regarding sanctions on Russia, for as long as the criminal ideology of Putinism remains in power in Russia, we have to go beyond punishing individuals and take the strategic decision of systemically weakening Russia's economy and industrial base. This is in our vital security interest. Yes, sanctions hit ordinary Russians too, and they are not our enemies. But let's admit it, it is primarily the responsibility of the Russian people to make sure that their mad Tsar cannot kill innocent people abroad. We should fully expect, and when possible, encourage the Russian people to take that responsibility seriously. Slava Ukraini.
Ich bitte nun Herrn Malik Asman.
Next we have Malik Asman.
Thank you, President. The courageous Ukrainian people are standing up to an evil act of aggression. Europe answers Ukraine's call for help. We rise up to defend those who are fighting for freedom and democracy. The EU is showing unity, and we are finally showing that we are not just a soft power. We are crippling Russia's economy, isolating Putin's regime, and reinforcing Ukraine's defense. But this is just the start, and we have to do more by excluding more Russian operators and banks from SWIFT, by blocking the Russian Central Bank's use of Western currencies. And we should even consider blocking Russian ships in our harbors, and more. Also, we have to increase our support for Ukraine's economy and defense with money and weapons. My message to the Ukrainian people: Europe stands with you. Slava Ukraini.
Danke.
Thank you very much.
Monsieur Jadot Yannick.
Mr. Yannick Jadot, please.
Monsieur le Président, chers collègues, en ce moment
President,
même, dans les
colleagues,
rues,
at
dans
this
les
very
maisons,
time, in the streets and in the
les
houses,
Ukrainiens
the
défendent héroïquement
Ukrainians are
la
heroically
liberté,
defending
ils défendent
freedom.
leur
They're
démocratie,
defending
ils
their
défendent leur
democracy,
intégrité territoriale.
their territorial
Ils sont pour
integrity.
l'Europe entière, le
They are
front
for Europe as a whole.
pour la sécurité,
They're doing this
pour la paix et pour
for
la démocratie
peace,
sur
security,
notre
and
continent. Alors
democracy
oui,
on our continent. So yes,
sanctionnons massivement
let's massively
Poutine
sanction
et les
Putin
oligarques
and
et
the
intégrons
oligarchs
immédiatement
and
la
immediately
Biélorussie dans ces
incorporate
sanctions.
Belarus into
Oui,
those
bien sûr,
sanctions.
soutenons
Yes, of course, let
militairement
us
la
militarily
résistance
support the
en Ukraine.
resistance in
Oui,
Ukraine.
reconnaissons
Yes,
le
let's
statut de
recognize
candidat
the
à l'Ukraine pour l'Union
status
européenne.
for
Oui,
the European
mettons au
Union
banc
of
la
Ukraine
Russie
and
de toute la communauté
let's
internationale
exclude
et
Russia from the
lançons
entire
un grand
international
plan
community and
d'investissement
launch
pour
a
la
major
sécurité
investment
climatique et
plan for
énergétique,
climate and
pour
energy
faire des
security
énergies renouvelables le
to
cœur,
create
parce que ce sont des énergies
renewable
de paix,
energies at the
et pour
heart
sortir
of
des
the plan,
dépendances
because they are the
énergétiques et des
energy of
complaisances
peace. And
politiques
let's get
qui
out of
tuent la
the
démocratie
political
et qui
complicity
tuent
that is
le
killing
climat.
democracy and
Alors
killing the
agissons
climate.
maintenant, soyons
Let's
fiers
act
de
now,
l'Europe,
let's be
aux
proud
côtés
of
de la
Europe,
résistance
alongside the
héroïque de
resistance, the
l'Ukraine.
heroic resistance of
Slava
Ukraine.
Vilnius, Ukrainia.
Slava
Merci.
Vilnius, Ukraine. Thank you.
Ich erteile Herrn Ulrich
Thank you.
Milan das Wort.
Mr. Urig, you have the floor.
Vážené vedenie Európskej únie, vážení kolegovia,
Your direction of the
ešte predtým, než
European
sa vyjadrím k
Union
Ukrajine, mi dovolte zo pár
colleagues, before I will say a couple of words
náročných, ale čestných
about
otázok.
Ukraine, I would like to ask you a couple of
Kde boli
honest
medzinárodné
questions.
sankcie, keď
Where were
Spojené štáty
international
americké
sanctions
zabili
when
v
the
Iraku
United
200 000
States
civilistov
killed
kvôli
200,000
vymyslenej zámienke o
civilians in
zbraniach hromadnej
Iraq
ničenia?
under the pretext
Kde
of
boli odsudzujúce
weapons of
rezolúcie,
mass
keď
destructions?
USA opäť
Where
v
were
rozpore
your
s
resolutions when the
medzinárodným
US, completely
bombardovali
against the
Jugosláviu,
international law,
Líbiu či
bombed
Sýriu?
Yugoslavia,
Kde bola
Libya, or
Európa,
Syria?
keď
Where was Europe
ukrajinskí žoldnieri
when
zabíjali deti na Donbase,
Ukrainian
či
mercenaries
upalovali
were killing
civilistov v Odese?
children in Donbass or were
udalosti
burning
posledných dní sú
civilians
pre
in
nás
Odessa? I
všetkých
hope that the
poučením,
actions
že
of the last
každá vojna je
days
zlá, priatelia,
are teaching
každá
us that
vojna je zlá,
all
nielen
wars
tou,
are bad.
ktoré
All
vedie
wars
Ruská
are bad,
federácia,
not
ale aj
only
tie,
the
ktoré
wars
vedú
of the
Spojené
Russian
štáty
Federation,
americké.
but also
A
the
každú vojnu
wars
treba
of the
odsúdiť.
United States of America.
To, čo
We
sa
have to
deje na
condemn
Ukrajine, je
all
hrozné
wars.
a musí
What's
to
happening in
skončiť.
Ukraine
Musí
is
to skončiť.
horrible and it
Ale
has
takisto je
to
hrozné
stop.
pokrytectvo
It has to
niektorých z
stop.
vás, kolegovia,
But the
ktorí
hypocrisy
prehľadajú
of
vojny
some
len
of
preto,
you colleagues
že ich
who
nevedú
ignore
Američania.
wars only because they are American, that's also hypocrisy. It's terrible.
Am Wort ist nun
Next,
unser Kollege Arnaud Danjean.
Arnaud Danjean is the next speaker.
Chers collègues, il y a
Colleagues,
des événements qui transgressent
the
si brutalement
events
toutes les
we've
règles
seen
établies, qui
affecting
défient
all
de
of the
façon tellement
rules in such a brutal
sidérante
fashion
toute rationalité, qui
against
font
all
basculer le
rational
monde dans des
thought.
zones inconnues, en agressant délibérément,
We've seen
grossièrement,
deliberate aggression,
un État
brutal
européen
aggression
libre et
against
souverain,
a free, sovereign
Vladimir
European
Poutine,
nation.
seul
And Vladimir
a
Putin
créé un de ces
is the
événements
only one
décisifs.
to be
Ce
blamed.
faisant, il a sous-estimé
By doing
le
that,
sentiment
he
national ukrainien.
underestimated what
Il a
the Ukrainians
sous-estimé
could do.
l'attachement à la
He
liberté,
underestimated
ce
how they
concept
felt
que
about
tous
their
les autocrates
independence.
croient dépasser.
That's what all
Il a
autocrats think.
sous-estimé aussi les
He
réactions
underestimated
européennes.
the reactions from Europe.
La résistance ukrainienne est admirable.
Ukrainian resistance
Elle mérite notre
is
absolu
admirable,
soutien.
and it needs
Absolu.
our 100%
On ne
support.
peut également que se féliciter de la prise de responsabilité des
We're
Européens.
very happy that Europe has taken
Mais la
its
satisfaction
responsibility,
de nous
shouldered
voir
its
aujourd'hui
responsibility.
réagir avec force et
But this
unité
satisfaction,
ne doit pas
working
altérer
in
notre
unity,
lucidité.
that shouldn't affect
Cette
our
terrible
lucidity.
guerre
This
va durer.
terrible war will
L'agresseur
last.
risque même de
The
gagner
aggressor
militairement,
may
malgré
actually win
l'indignité
militarily,
morale et sa défaite
even though it
politique
has a lack of
inexorable.
morality.
N'oublions pas non plus que
Let's not
face à la
forget
guerre
either
sur notre continent,
that given there
qui a
is war in
déjà
Europe,
existé entre 1945
and
et
we've had
aujourd'hui,
wars since